For the first time ever, 17 different comic book titles were on the stands with a cover date of April 1937. Ace Comics #1 debuted from David McKay Publications. This ran for 151 issues, and the first issue had the first appearances of Jungle Jim by Alex Raymond, Blondie by Chick Young, and Crazy Cat. Ace Comics was a comic book series published by David McKay Publications between 1937 and 1949. The title reprinted syndicated newspaper strips owned by King Features Syndicate, following the successful formula of a mix of adventure and humor strips that David McKay had done with King Comics, starting the year earlier. The first issue of Ace Comics was published in April 1937, including The Adventures of Hunter Jungle Jim, written by Flash Gordon writer Alex Raymond, Chick Young's Blondie, and George Herriman's surreal Crazy Cat strip, all three characters going on to appear in every issue of Ace Comics over the next 12 years. The Adventures of Orphan Tim Tyler in Tim Tyler's Luck, and Curly Harper at Lakespur, both by Blondie writer-artist Chick Young's brother Lyman Young, appeared. Tim Tyler's Luck ran in every issue of Ace Comics, while the Curly Harper strip ran until issue 100. The Blondie strip also appeared in every issue of Ace Comics, as did the classic humor strip The Katzenjammer Kids by Rudolph Dirks. The strip Seeing Stars ran in the first 50 issues, written by Arthur Beeman and based around the Hollywood film industry, with cartoon versions of a number of Hollywood stars including Fred Astaire, Betty Grable, and Judy Garland. The cover of Ace Comics #1 is by Joe Musial, as humorous children cover featuring Katzenjammer Kids, Pete the Tramp, Barney Google, Stuffy Smith, and Elmer. Some of the highlights of the issue include Tex Thorne, a 4-page story written by Zane Grey with art by Alan Dean, a Western frontier story. Jungle Jim was a 4-page story from writer Don Moore and artist Alex Raymond. Katzenjammer Kids was a 4-page story from writer-artist H.H. Nur. And Harold Nur, born September 4th, 1882, lived until July 8th, 1949, an American comic strip creator who signed his work H.H. Nur. He was best known as the writer-artist of the Katzenjammer Kids for 35 years. He was extremely prolific, producing more than 1,500 Sunday comic pages between 1901 and 1914. From 1903 to 1914, he drew the Feinheimer twins, an imitation of the Katzenjammer Kids, which made it obvious he was the ideal artist to replace Dirks on his Katzenjammer Kids. And he took over the Sunday strip in 1914. Other highlights include Elmer, a 2-page story from writer Doc Winner. Charles Winner, born December 18, 1885, lived until August 12, 1956. Better known as Doc Winner, an American cartoonist and notable for his comic strips Tubby and Elmer, plus contributions to Thimble Theater, Barney Google, and other King Feature strips. He began his strip Tubby for United Feature Syndicate in 1923. Tilly the Toiler was featured in a 2-page story from writer-artist Russ Westover. And Russell Westover, born March 8, 1886, lived until May 3, 1966, cartoonist best known for his long-running comic strip Tilly the Toiler. He worked on his concept of a flapper character in a strip he titled Rose of the Office. With the title changed to Tilly the Toiler, it sold to King Features Syndicate. Leaving the Herald, he began Tilly the Toiler for King Features in 1921, eventually leading to a 1927 film adaptation by Hearst's Cosmopolitan Pictures with Marion Davies as Tilly. During the late 1920s, more than 600 papers were carrying Tilly the Toiler. In 1926, he added another strip, The Van Swaggers, to his Sunday pages at Topper. Couples and Leon published a series of at least 8 Tilly the Toiler reprint book collections beginning in the late 20s, continuing into the 30s. And Westover profited from another movie when Kay Harris appeared in the title role of Columbia Pictures' Tilly the Toiler in 1941. Tim Tyler's Luck was a 4-page story from writer and artist Lyman Young. Born October 20th, 1893, lived until February 12th, 1984. American cartoonist who created the strip Tim Tyler's Luck. His younger brother, Chick Young, was the creator of Blondie. In 1927, he created his own strip, The Kid Sister, a spin-off of the Killy Kids. Young launched Tim Tyler's Luck in 1928, and in 1935 he added a topper strip, Curly Harper. Blondie appeared in a 4-page story from writer-artist Chick Young, who was born January 9th, 1901, living until March 14th, 1973, an American cartoonist who created the long-running strip Blondie. His 1919 high school yearbook cites his nickname as Chicken, which is the source of his familiar pen name and signature, Chick. According to King Features Syndicate, Young had a daily readership of 52 million people. Young created Blondie, and when it debuted in 1930, it quickly became the most popular comic strip in America, gaining even more readers when Blondie and Dagwood married in 1933, followed the next year by the birth of Baby Dumpling. With films, radio, TV, and products, the strip became a licensing and media bonanza that made Young a wealthy man. During his lifetime, he produced more than 15,000 Blondie strips. Described by former King Features president Joseph Connolly as the greatest storyteller of his kind since the immortal Charles Dickens. Young, at his peak, received more fan mail than any other cartoonist. His other works include the strip Colonel Potterby and The Duchess, which ran as a topper strip on the Blondie page from 1935 through 63. Etta Cat was a two-page story from writer-artist Paul Robinson. Born June 19, 1898, living until September 21, 1974. A comic strip artist best known for his long-running Etta Cat comic strip. In 1932, he debuted Etta Cat, and it ran in more than 50 American newspapers for almost 50 years, from 1925 to 1974. Crazy Cat was a two-page story from writer-artist George Harriman. Born August 22, 1880, living until April 25, 1944. An American cartoonist best known for the comic strip Crazy Cat, which ran from 1913 to 44. More influential than popular, Crazy Cat had an appreciative audience among those in the arts. Harriman began the Dingbat family, starring E. Pluribus Dingbat and his family. Harriman used typelettering on the strip in 1910 before going back to hand lettering. In July 1912, while Harriman had the Dingbats on vacation, Crazy Cat and Ignatz Mouse took over the strip, which was retitled Crazy Cat and I, Mouse, for the duration. In October 1913, Crazy Cat debuted as an independent strip on the Daily Comics page, and Crazy Cat debuted in films in 1916. The first animated films starring a cat were produced by Hearst's International Film Service, though without Harriman's direct involvement. Don Winslow of the Navy #1 was a new short-lived series from Merwell Publishing. The first issue of only 2 from Merwell was a hybrid pulp comic, 16 pages of comics in color, and a complete Don Winslow novel. The cover is a striking painted cover, and DC great Sheldon Mayer contributed interior art. Sheldon Mayer art on the Captain Colorful and Jupiter Jones stories. One of the first modern comics ever published with a single character as the focus. Don Winslow of the Navy was an American comic strip created by Frank Martinek and distributed by the Bell Syndicate from 1934 to 55. The title character was a spy-chasing lieutenant commander in naval intelligence. The comic strip led to a radio adventure serial that began in 1937, as well as film serials that began in 1942. Fawcett Comic Books would start publishing original stories in 1943. Western Action Thrillers #1 was a new comic, cover dated April 1937. It was an unusual one-shot and the 4th title ever published for Dell Comics in the modern comics age. Square binding and a thick 100 pages. Featured Buffalo Bill's story, The Texas Kid, Laramie Joe, Two Gun Thompson, Rimrock O'Reilly, and Wild West Bill. Detective Comics #2 from DC Comics had a cover date of April 1937. Overstreet Price Guide cites it as rare, and Gerber's Photojournal Guide to Comic Books gives us a 9, or very rare. Clegg Flessel did the cover of this early classic book. Superman co-creators Siegel and Schuster contributed scripting and interior art. This was the second issue of the longest-running comic book title of all time. Craig Flessel did the cover artwork. Siegel and Schuster gave us a lengthy 13-page Slam Bradley detective mystery. Craig Flessel gave us a 6-page Brett Lawton detective mystery, and this was the last appearance of this character. Siegel and Schuster gave us another title, Spy, running 4 pages, an adventure title featuring Bart Regan. The feature was formerly titled Bart Regan Spy. Star Comics #2 was published by Harry A. Chesler. Cover dated April 1937. This is rated a Gerber 8, very rare comic. And it featured Dick Ryan cover art. There is a Billy Wright pedigree copy of this early comic. Some of the highlights include River of Death, a 3-page story from writer-artist Craig Flessel, who also gave us a 2-page Sources of Famous Quotations. Chesler Comics also gave us Star Ranger number 2, cover dated April 1937. This was the second issue of the first ever Western comic book. Gerber rates it as scarce, meaning less than 50 copies have survived. Cover art is by Fred Schwab of the character Jess Foulin. Some other highlights include The Old One, a 3-page story from writer Norman Daniels, and art by Fred Gardener. Bandit Raid was a 4-page story from writer Tom Curry, with art by Fred Gardener. Pal was a 3-page story from writer W.C. Miller, with art by Fred Gardener. Fred Gardener was the main contributor to this issue. In fact, he even wrote and drew 5 other stories: Home on the Range, Go for More, Midnight Mob, Vanishing Herd, and Okie Dokie. Frederick Gardener, born October 3rd, 1913, lived until September 13th, 2002, an American illustrator and comic book writer-artist best known for his work in the 30s and 40s, and in the 50s he worked on the Western comic book series The Durango Kid. Gardener contributed 2 features to Action Comics #1, the comic book that introduced Superman. He joined the studio of Harry A. Chesler, an early packager supplying comics featured on demand for publishers. There he drew adventure features such as Dave Dean and the sci-fi feature Dan Hastings before going freelance in 1938. Gardner's first known comic credits appear in Western Stories Star Ranger #2. He also created for Star Comics Funny Pages and Funny Picture Stories. He is among the contributors to the future DC Comics landmark issue Action Comics #1 in 1938, the comic that gave us Superman. There, Gardener wrote, drew, and lettered the 12-page feature introducing his magician hero, Zaytara, a character remaining in the DC stable even to today. Gardener was also one of the artists on 2 features handled previously by Craig Flessel in More Fun Comics, Pet Morgan, and in Detective Comics, Speed Saunders. Some of the other highlights include Gun Boss, a 3-page story from writer Jack Meltzer with pencils by Craig Flessel. And Craig Flessel also gave us Boss of the Ranch, a 1-page story that he wrote and drew under the alias of Fless in this humor title. Pinto Pete was a 1-page story, also from Craig Flessel under the alias Fless. Hurtling Death is a 3-page story from writer Will Harr with pencils by Craig Flessel under the alias Valens Marino. Bull Moose is a 1-page story by Craig Flessel under the alias CF. And High Lee, High Low is a 1-page story from Craig Flessel under the alias again of Fless.